Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Why No One Plays. This is gonna be a remake of an older episode in the same fashion as Aurelion Sol. Today, we're gonna be featuring Neeko, the Curious Chameleon. This one's a relatively new champion. She came out in December of 2018, which, even though it's been well over 2 years at this point, is pretty young considering most of the ones I've talked about have been around for 5, 6, 7 plus years, and modern champions maintain a pretty strong play rate given how much more they can bring to the table since they're more fun, in air quotes, to play. For some brief history, she's actually had a rather warm reception at the beginning. Most of Season 9 saw her between 5 to 8%, which is a very healthy number, though not for the right reasons. Everyone abused her for her on-hit attack speed build, not for her actual AP one, because of how much damage she did every 3 autos. But ever since that got nerfed to the ground, she's held just a flat 2% for almost 2 years now, which puts her squarely in Why No One Plays territory. Really quickly though, I want to talk about today's sponsor. GIF Your Game is here once again. You guys probably remember it from a few months ago, and it's back with a lot more updates, quality of life changes, and features. If this is your first time hearing about it, GIF Your Game is a one-stop shop for recording high-quality GIF and video clips of your gaming moments. It automatically links up with whatever game you're playing, and by clicking a hotkey, it records the last 15 seconds. Since most of my viewers play League, there's some extra features built in where GIF Your Game automatically records any clip based on a certain condition. So for instance, if you set it to record triple kills and above, anytime you score a triple, quadra, or pentakill, you don't have to manually go into replays to record it. This software already has a clip ready for you. You can also set it to automatically upload to your Twitch, Discord, Reddit, Twitter, and whatnot if you like to share clips. There's a new desktop feed that shows popular content as well, so you can share it among the GIF Your Game community. Some extra features they plan to add in the future are mobile integration, and for League, cinematic camera views. You know, those different viewpoints you sometimes see in those documentaries. Just like last time, I have a referral link in the description below if you want to give it a go. It's a brand new tool with a lot of features they plan to add in the future, so I highly suggest you check it out. I really enjoy this software myself, and chances are in the future you're going to see me working with them again, so please take a look at it to support the channel. But anyways, back to the video. When it comes to modern champions, we all know they have gimmicks. Sylas can steal ultimates, Viego transforms into his victims, Zoe steals summoner spells and item actives, stuff like that. Neeko's gimmick is shapeshifting. Her whole shtick is deception and trickery, creating clones and taking on her teammate's appearance. I sort of stopped going through champion abilities in these episodes since I'm sure many of you know what she does, but I do want to go in depth on a few of them since they're integral to why Neeko has such a low play rate. First up is Tangle Barbs, her E. It's a skill shot that damages and roots all enemies hit, but if it hits at least one enemy, it grows in size, speed, and doubles the root duration. This ability at max rank has an empowered root of up to 3 seconds. That's as long as Morgana's Dark Binding, but unlike her, Tangle Barbs is AoE, so it can inflict this 3-second root on a lot of people, and the only condition is to just hit at least one person. Last episode I compared Lux, Morgana, and Zyra's root abilities, and how Zyra's has less range and slower projectile speed in exchange for being able to hit multiple targets. Tangle Barbs is that taken even further, even less range but lasts much longer. The sheer amount of lockdown Neeko brings with a single ability can exceed that of entire champions. Naturally, this makes her a catcher. Up next is Shape Splitter. We don't really care about the passive, but when she casts her W, she goes invisible for half a second and spawns a clone that runs in a target direction. A lot of people in League greatly underestimate the value of producing an active hitbox on demand. Neeko's clone can get hit by any single target attack, so it can absorb things like Blitzhook, Ash Arrow, Kled Ultimate, things like that. Outside of that, it's mostly used to set up her ultimate thanks to the brief invisibility and movement speed boost. Neeko also has a super ultimate in the form of Pop Blossom. I call them super ults as these are the types of ultimates that can single-handedly win a team fight if they land successfully. Unlike Fiddlesticks and Kennen, whose ults deal damage over time, Pop Blossom is a giant explosion and stun all at once, but she has to charge it for a second and change, and the enemy team can see you ramping it up unless you use it while shapeshifted. It's definitely one of the best ultimates in teamfights if we look at it strictly for the damage, area coverage, and lockdown. Basically, it's an Amumu ultimate that actually hurts. I brought up these 3 in particular because those are what bring us to Neeko's biggest problem. She has a really bad case of Kennen syndrome. If you didn't watch my episode on him, which I highly suggest you do, Kennen has 2 mutually exclusive playstyles. He spends most of the neutral game using his range to harass you because he has an easy getaway tool thanks to Lightning Rush. But his ultimate is designed for full-on engagement, rushing headfirst into the enemy team to damage and stun as many people as possible. Neeko has this very same issue. Her standard playstyle is incohesive with her engage. That is, she can't transition from her trade combos and neutral into an all-in, which makes it counterintuitive as to what she's supposed to be doing. Even though her background is about being this multifaceted character, being a chameleon, that doesn't translate well into her gameplay for a lot of players. Neeko fits into two subclasses, Catcher and Burst. There are range catchers who can pick people off from afar like Morgana, Jhin, and Bard, and then there are melee catchers who also have long reach but use that to close the distance on targets like Pyke, Blitzcrank, and Thresh. Burst mages can either be melee or ranged. There's no constraint to that other than being exclusively melee burst or range burst. There is no burst mage in League of Legends who's capable of doing both. Tangle Barbs is a long-range projectile that roots targets struck, so it doesn't change their position, which automatically makes her a range catcher, but her burst type is melee. Pop Blossom does have a huge radius, but the epicenter is her. Neeko does have consistent follow-up for her root thanks to her Q, which automatically does the full damage on anyone struck by a max rank E, but that doesn't gracefully segue into her actual full burst. Some of you might be thinking, what about Morgana? She's a range catcher but her ultimate is a melee. Correct, but Morgana isn't a burst mage, she's exclusively a catcher. Soul Shackles was not designed for burst damage, it was designed for control. Even though it does pretty much the same amount of damage as Neeko's ultimate if both hits connect, and even though both of them are stuns, Morgana's ultimate is better suited for zone control than it is dealing damage. Usually, a champion's all-in is just an extension of their normal combo. For instance, Syndra. Her usual rotation is Q for damage and to summon a Dark Sphere, E to stun them with that sphere, then use that W to pick it back up and deal more damage. Then she could decide if she wants to use her ultimate after that. She doesn't have to change anything. Ahri's normal combo is her charm, then Q, then W. She could then use her ultimate for some extra damage by dashing around them. Neeko can't quite throw out E, then Q, and walk up to use ultimate because chances are she's too far away to do that unless she's actually looking to go for an all-in. Now, despite her having divergent playstyles, Neeko isn't bad at either one. Her full engage is on par with actual burst mages like Annie and Syndra, and her neutral game can sting really badly if you're not dodging her roots. So I wouldn't go so far as to say this is a deal breaker for her, at least not until I talk about the rest of her issues. For a champion who relies heavily on their primary engage, Neeko doesn't have the right set of tools to pull it off. She has no dashes and average tempo, which means unless she lands the empowered root on multiple enemies at close range, there is no way for her to get to priority targets without external sources like Flash, Hextech Rocket Belt, or her own teammates. Neeko's ultimate cannot be used as primary engage because it's too easy to see coming. Pop Blossom does huge burst damage, but if someone on the enemy team has remotely any disengage like Alistar or Janna, there goes all their pressure. Alternatively, if they have Shurelya's battle song, then everyone can just run away. Now, Neeko can hide the animation if she uses her passive to transform into an ally, but when someone on the enemy team is running straight towards you without even using their abilities, I'd argue that's enough reasonable suspicion for you to assume it's actually her. What separates the good super ultimates from the not so good ones is but one question. Can they get close enough quickly? That's why Amumu, Malphite, and Fiddlesticks have amazing super ultimates because they can get in really damn easily and fast. Fiddlesticks used to struggle with this issue. He could only fear one target with Terrify, so it was pretty easy for the enemy team to disperse and run away from him. His new Terrify passive though allows him to instantly fear all targets struck by an ability if he was in Fog of War, making it so now he's guaranteed to dish out at least 2 seconds of his ultimate on top of the fact that he can teleport over walls. Neeko does gain a decent movement speed buff with Shape Splitter, but that doesn't magically get her into the middle of the enemy team. The only way she can innately land her ultimate is to use her empowered root. Pop Blossom just isn't consistent. It takes almost 2 seconds for the actual ability to complete its animation. Getting close to the enemy team and holding them still for that long is not easy to do, except when they engage on you first. Playstyle janks aside, let's talk about her actual performance in the current meta. Even though she packs a decent amount of utility, none of them do a good enough job shrugging off engage, and her attacks can be dodged easily since they're slow or take too long. Her suboptimal range and lack of self-peel can only be remedied through item purchases, which causes her to lose a lot of effective damage. We've been in a skirmishing meta ever since the beginning of Season 10, right when Neeko's play rate started falling off. This isn't a coincidence. She has 2 major adversaries, Slayers and other mages. The reason she loses to Assassins and Skirmishers is because they can nuke her in half a second while effortlessly dodging her attacks. The reason she loses to Battle Mages and Burst Mages is because she gets outgunned by the former and outspaced by the latter. Even though Tangle Barbs has an insane root duration, especially for an AoE ability, its low 1000 units of range basically requires her to be within striking distance of assassins or other mages, so it's much less safer to use than light or dark binding, both of those reach 1200. I should remind you that roots do not stop enemies from attacking. They can still use auto attacks and abilities, so even if you land a nice catch, you still have to deal with the fact that Xerath, Ahri, Anivia, Victor, just about any mage can blast you to Kingdom Come. That's only in the mid lane. As a support, her worst matchups are long-range artillery mages and ironically other catchers. Against Xerath, Vel'Koz, and Zyra, she can't do anything. Like legit, those are -2 matchups. You could be the best Neeko world, but if the enemy support has above room temperature IQ, there's nothing you could do. Other catchers like Nautilus, Thresh, and Bard have way better lockdown than you do, and since you offer no utility to your AD carry, they're in even more danger than you are. Neeko needs items to function properly. Her core build is Hextech Rocket Belt and Zhonya's Hourglass, both of which are utility focused, meaning her mid-game damage isn't going to be that high. It's not a death cap and a Ludens. She needs Rocket Belt to make it easier to get in range for her ultimate, and then needs Zhonya's to keep herself from getting one-shotted while she uses it, because she doesn't get the shield until after jumping up in the air. I suppose technically you can go Ludens and death cap for your core if the enemy team doesn't have high burst damage or mobility, but again, we're in a skirmish heavy meta, filled with champions that have no shortage of combat mobility or burst damage. In other words, you wouldn't be going full damage Neeko unless you were really far ahead, at which point you could do the same thing on just about any other champion. Adding more salt to the wound, Neeko is at her strongest in the early and mid game, but gets myrtleized by early game champions like Katarina, Irelia, LeBlanc, Rumble, Diana, Viego, Fizz, and such. And she naturally falls off because she has no DPS and her Q and ultimate don't get faster in terms of cast time. Essentially, it's too easy to beat her because she's not good enough, and part of that is due to how Riot allocated her power budget. A lot of it was spent on her passive, bringing us to the final problem. Neeko's shapeshifting abilities don't really do anything. Being able to transform into your teammates could lead to some really nasty mind games because she can disguise herself as the 10-0 Kha'Zix to scare her lane opponent, but only for a few seconds. Because she and her clones can't mimic the actual abilities of whoever she copies, it's not convincing enough to fool the enemy team, especially if they're paying attention. The reason Wukong and Shaco's clones are really scary is because they actually attack. They may not do a whole lot of damage, but they do attack and you have to respect that. All Neeko can do when she transforms is auto attack, that's it. The moment she uses an ability, she goes right back to her old self. I don't know how many of you were around during that time, but at one point, LeBlanc used to be able to send her mirror image into another lane and pretend to use an ability. It would genuinely look like the real LeBlanc until you realize her attack did no damage to you. I was wondering why they wouldn't let you do the same for Neeko. If she transformed into say Ahri and threw out a fake charm, that would make her shapeshifting abilities something you have to actually fear, but no, all she can do is look like them. Thing is, Riot put a lot of her power budget into that passive, yet it doesn't do much other than the initial scare factor. Fiddle's new passive where he places fake versions of himself is just as useless. I have yet to see an instance where his effigy baits out an actual flash or summoner spell from the enemy team. It's also not that hard to distinguish Neeko's W clone from the real her because when you see her running straight towards you without even using an attack, you know it's fake. Shape Splitter is still a good ability, don't get me wrong. But given how much she's lacking in other areas, I don't think it's a worthwhile trade-off. I think this point is pretty contentious among Neeko mains. I know there are some Neeko one-tricks who say her passive is really freaking good, while others say it's kind of useless. Since her clones and disguises don't do anything physically, they have to do something psychologically, but even then, it doesn't do that job well enough. There are two ways I think Riot can buff her to make her gimmick feel better to use. They can either extend the clone's lifespan indefinitely and be controllable like it's Tibbers or Shaco's clone, and not just run in one direction for a few seconds, or they can make it so Neeko can use at least one ability of whoever she copies, but it doesn't do any damage or anything, just smoke and mirrors. Obviously, we wouldn't want her to use dashes or anything that can change her position because that'd be broken. Auto-attacking as that champion just isn't enough because if you saw Ezreal walking up to hit you, he would throw out a Q, right? It would be pretty suspicious if he just walked up to use a basic attack without doing anything else, something like that. All in all, among other why no one plays champions, Neeko shares the somehow detrimental honor of being too fair of a champion. She's okay, like not great. There's nothing about her that's inherently amazing. Now, whether or not that was intentional, I'm not sure. Neeko is all about copying other people, so maybe that's why she feels like this weird mixture of a burst mage and catcher. But if we're talking about why people don't like playing her, it's because she doesn't have a very intuitive playstyle and she's average. On the plus side, it means she's a safe champion to one-trick because her pick ban rate is so low, and Riot likely won't buff or nerf her, which is often why the only Neekos you see are super good on her because they really love to play her. Anyways, I think that's about it for today. If you enjoyed the video, a rating would be much appreciated. Don't forget to sub to the channel for more content like this. Consider following me on my socials and joining my Discord server if you'd like. And lastly, check out my previous Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But thanks so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Take care.